From BGR.com. Is this the end of AI as we know it? It's me saying that, by the way. OpenAI, the company behind the popular generative AI tool ChatGPT, might be forced, and this is according to this news report, to wipe its chatbot and start completely from scratch, according to a report from NPR. The wipe may come as part of a potential lawsuit, which could also see OpenAI fined $150,000 for each piece of copyrighted material used to train the language model. Okay, so the question, I think, kind of harks back to the Buggles song, "Video Killed the Radio Star." I know that feeling. Did copyright, or could copyright, kill the GPT star? Let's get a technology journalist on now, former technology editor of The Guardian, Charles Arthur, online to us. Charles, thank you for waiting while I said all those words. How are you tonight?
I'm good, thanks, Howard.
I don't know if you have any thoughts, by the way, before we get into the ChatGPT thing, about that story to do with Pink Floyd and the monitoring of brainwaves?
Yeah, the Pink Floyd thing is interesting because there's been a lot of effort at monitoring brain activity, trying to figure out what is going on in brains as much as anything, because it would help people who have locked-in syndrome. This is interesting in as much as it shows that you can get an AI system to figure out something of what's happening, that it's able to make some sense of all the electrical signals. I mean, in its way, it's a bit like when you take an ECG for your heart, and the doctors are able quite amazingly to figure out what's going on if things are going wrong. They can tell you, well, you've got a calcium deficit, or you've got too much of this or too much of that. This is sort of that, but amped up sort of 100-fold. We're some way off being able to figure out what people are thinking exactly, but you could sort of see that if you roll it forward 10 years, 15 years, you might be getting there.
Seems to be the direction of travel with that. Fascinating story. Thank you for giving me your thoughts about that. ChatGPT, of course, it's been one of the main themes of this year, and the rapid growth in tools of this kind in AI. Isn't it interesting? We know that these tools have to trawl the internet for information that they base whatever it is they spew out upon. But it all could, according to this piece that was originally from National Public Radio in America, if that material is copyrighted, and they can the owners of the copyright can trace it back and say, that's our material that you sourced this, whatever it is you spewed out, ChatGPT, it might actually stop the entire thing. What do you make of this?
Yeah, the big bit there is the clause that you introduced there that began with if you can trace it back. So let's just talk about copyright and what can have copyright, what can't have copyright. Things that humans create do have copyright. But there was a famous case a few years ago where a monkey took a photographer's camera and took a selfie with it. And the question was, does the photographer own the copyright to that photo, or does the monkey somehow own the copyright, or does no one own the copyright? And it was quite a celebrated case, and it turns out that the photographer does not own the copyright to the photo, because even though it's his camera, the monkey actually did the action of making the photograph. And we don't think that monkeys reached the level of sentience needed to actually be able to claim copyright.
I remember that, because there was a huge debate, wasn't there, about the rights perceived of creatures.
Exactly. So in the same way, something like ChatGPT cannot have copyright. It can't claim copyright on things that it creates, and that might be a bit of a problem for OpenAI down the road. But that's not quite what this is about. This is about the stuff that you put into ChatGPT in order to feed it so that it will be able to come up with the splurge of words that it does. And the difficulty here is that what ChatGPT and all these other large language models, as they're called, have done is essentially they've walked around the whole of the web and looked at it and said, oh, okay, so this is what people do after they say and this is what people do after they say unless. And it's rather like, if you sort of think of it rather like someone going around an art gallery. They go around an art gallery that's filled with Picassos, and I've done this myself. You go to the Picasso Museum in Paris and you see how his style develops. And you could say, okay, well, I've absorbed all Picasso's work now. I'm going to go and paint like Picasso. And you can find people who are very good at painting like Picasso, and they'll do you one on demand. But it isn't a Picasso. And Picasso couldn't claim that a pastiche in this way were he still alive, wouldn't be able to claim that this was an infringement of his copyright. There's no copyright in something new that you create, even if it uses something copyrighted to inform it. And that is the difficulty, I think, that is going to arise here for the New York Times, which is considering suing OpenAI, which makes ChatGPT. I think this is the difficulty: is you can't actually poke around inside the large language model. Rather, like you can't poke around inside a brain and say, "Oh, here's where they listen to another brick in the wall, and this is this is what the sound is." You can't do that. A large language model is a system of sort of weights. It says, oh, if you say and, then you're quite likely to say unless, and then you're quite likely to say this. It's a probabilistic thing. It just throws out words that it thinks are quite likely to follow if you've asked a particular question.
So anybody who tries legal action of that kind then is going to be on very sticky ground. It's not as if it was clear-cut the famous My Sweet Lord George Harrison thing, where it was claimed that He's So Fine, which was originally a Phil Spector Chiffons hit, wasn't it, was plagiarized by George Harrison to be My Sweet Lord. They had the same He's So Fine, My Sweet Lord. You know, that was pretty clear. But this kind of thing is not nearly so clear.
No, this is not nearly so clear. I mean, this is a bit more like, but I'd say even less clear than, again, to take the music one, there was a hit a few years ago, which was where I think it was Curtis Mayfield's estate said that it sounded too like one of theirs. And Pharrell Williams and others was sued over it and eventually had to give in. But that was one where you said, well, it sort of sounds quite similar, but it's not exactly the same thing, is it? And with ChatGPT, you're even further away because you're talking about a system which is filled with billions and billions of words and documents. And the New York Times' contribution to that is actually fractional. You know, it's such a tiny percentage that you'd struggle to see it.
So let's not write off ChatGPT. Charles, thank you so much for explaining that so well for us. Thank you. Charles Arthur, journalist, author and former technology editor of The Guardian. So do not underestimate the power of ChatGPT. It looks like it rolls on. And talking about that Pink Floyd song, I believe we've got the sound decoded from those people's brains. Have a check of this. We don't need no education. We don't need no thought control.